In Lagos, mornings do not arrive quietly. They crash in with horn sounds, shouting vendors, rushing footsteps, and the smell of hot bread mixed with dust. That particular morning was no different. Zana woke up before her alarm. Not because she wanted to, but because she felt watched. She lay still on her thin mattress, eyes open, breathing slow. The ceiling fan above her made a weak clicking sound as it turned. Outside, someone was already arguing loudly on the street. Yet, inside her room, something felt off. She turned her head slightly and stared at the small mirror hanging on the wall. Her reflection stared back. Same face. Same tired eyes. Same neatly braided hair resting calmly on her shoulders. Nothing strange. And yet, her chest felt tight. Zana sat up and rubbed her face. Stress, she muttered to herself. She had cried herself to sleep the night before. It had been 3 days since her mother's burial. 3 days since the house that once smelled like warm food and laughter became silent forever. Zana stood up, walked to the mirror, and touched her hair absent-mindedly. Her fingers paused for a second longer than usual. A strange thought crossed her mind. Don't touch it. She frowned. What nonsense, she whispered. She shook her head, picked up her scarf, and prepared for work. That was the last morning her life felt normal. That evening, rain fell hard. The kind of rain that makes Lagos roads flood within minutes. Zana returned to her room soaked, exhausted, and emotionally empty. She dropped her bag on the floor and sank onto the bed without turning on the light. The room smelled like damp clothes and candle wax. Her phone buzzed. A message from her aunt. Be strong. Your mother would want that. Zana stared at the message until her eyes burned. She doesn't know anything, Zana whispered. She stood up suddenly, anger and grief mixing inside her like fire. Everybody keeps saying the same thing, she snapped to the empty room. Be strong. Be strong. Be strong. She laughed, a dry, broken sound. Strong for who? She walked into the bathroom and turned on the light. The mirror reflected a young woman who looked older than her age. Her eyes were swollen. Her lips trembled slightly. Her hair was still neat. Still normal. Still untouched by loss. Suddenly, she remembered her mother's voice. Not clearly, more like an echo. Protect what is yours, even if it costs you comfort. Zana swallowed hard. She stared at her hair again. A strange calm settled over her. Slowly, she shook her head and whispered. I won't wash it. The word surprised even her. She didn't know why she said them. She didn't know how long she meant. She just knew she meant it. She tied her hair gently, wrapped it with a scarf, and stepped away from the mirror. That night, she slept without dreams. The first week passed quietly. Zana went to work. She stitched clothes. She smiled when necessary. She spoke when spoken to. No one noticed anything strange. Why would they? It was just hair. But Zana noticed. Every morning, when she stood in front of the mirror, she felt hesitation. A pause. Like her hands were waiting for permission before touching her head. She avoided it. She wrapped her hair carefully, every single day. By the second week, something changed. Her sleep became deeper, too deep. She began waking up with her heart racing, unable to remember what she had dreamed. Sometimes, she woke up already sitting upright, breathing heavily, as if she had been running. Once, she woke up with her hands clenched tightly around her scarf. She stared at them in confusion. Why was I holding this so tight, she asked herself. At work, her colleague laughed one afternoon. Zana, you don't joke again these days. Zana forced a smile. I'm just tired. But that wasn't the truth. She was alert. Constantly alert. As if her body was listening for something her mind couldn't hear yet. One evening, while cooking, she felt it for the first time. A slight pull at the back of her head. Not pain. Not pressure. Just awareness. She froze. The pot boiled over, spilling water onto the stove, but she didn't move. Her heart pounded. Slowly, carefully, she reached back and touched her wrapped hair. Nothing happened. Silence. She laughed shakily. I'm losing my mind, she whispered. But that night, as she lay in bed, she felt it again. This time, stronger. And this time, it felt like a warning. If anyone had asked Zana whether anything was wrong, she would have said no. And she would have meant it. Other days she wrapped them low and simple. It even became part of her look. One afternoon, her colleague teased her lightly. Zana, you and head tie, you people are best friends now. Zana laughed. At least it's cheaper than going to salon every week. Everyone laughed with her. And that was the truth, or at least, part of it. She wasn't worried about her hair. She wasn't avoiding it in fear. She simply didn't think about it. It became like breathing. Automatic. That was what made it dangerous. At night, however, her senses sharpened. Not fear, awareness. She started noticing small things, how the air in her room felt heavier after midnight, how silence in Lagos was never truly silent, how shadows seemed deeper when the light was low. Still, she slept. And still, she dreamed. The dreams didn't come every night. That was what made them worse. When they came, they felt personal. In one dream, Zana stood in a large open space. No buildings. No people. Just wide land stretching endlessly under a pale sky. Her hair was loose, blowing gently behind her. She felt calm. Then she heard footsteps. Slow. Measured. Unhurried. She turned to look, but there was no one there. Yet the footsteps continued, circling her. When she woke up, her pillow was warm, and her heart beat steadily, not fast. It felt like she had just returned from a place she knew well. Another night, she dreamed of sitting beside her mother in silence. They didn't speak. They didn't touch. They just sat and watched water flow past them. When Zana tried to ask a question, her voice wouldn't come out. She woke up feeling peaceful and confused. At work, she caught herself zoning out, staring into space. Time seemed to slip strangely. Some days passed too quickly. Others dragged endlessly. Still, she wasn't worried. Everyone grieves differently. That's what people say. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing special about the day. The tailoring shop was hot, noisy, and busy. A customer complained loudly about a dress that wasn't ready. Another customer laughed while scrolling through her phone. Zana worked quietly, focused on her stitches. Then, without warning, the noise around her faded. Not completely, just enough to feel distant. Her hands continued moving, but her mind drifted. She felt steady. Grounded. As if something unseen had settled into place. Her colleague called her name. Zana. She looked up immediately. Yes? Her colleague frowned. You didn't hear me calling you since. Zana blinked. I'm sorry. I was concentrating. The moment passed. But later that evening, while returning home, something else happened. The bus she boarded almost collided with another vehicle at a junction. People screamed. Someone cursed loudly. The driver slammed the brakes. Zana didn't flinch. She remained calm, holding on to the seat in front of her. After the bus stopped, she realized her heart wasn't racing. It felt normal. Too normal. She looked around. People were shaken, shouting, laughing nervously. A woman beside her stared. "You are not afraid?" Zana shrugged gently. "I think I knew we wouldn't crash." The woman laughed awkwardly. "Ah. You are strong, oh." Zana smiled politely. But inside, a quiet thought formed, not fear, not excitement. Just curiosity. How did I know? That night, Zana tied her scarf, lay down, and slept deeply. She didn't think about her hair. She didn't think about promises. She didn't think about meanings. But somewhere between sleep and waking, something listened. By the 7th week, Zana had fully settled into a routine. Morning. Work. Evening. Sleep. Nothing dramatic happened, and that was exactly why nothing felt wrong. Her scarf collection grew. Some were bright, some dull, some patterned. She tied them neatly, confidently. People even complimented her style. "Zana, this one fits you well," a customer said one afternoon. "Thank you," Zana replied, smiling. She smiled more these days. Not out of happiness, but ease. The sharp heaviness she used to feel in her chest after her mother's death had softened. She still missed her, still felt the absence, but it no longer crushed her. Sometimes, when she walked home at dusk, she felt oddly protected. Not watched. Protected. Like something unseen had taken note of her steps. She didn't question it. Why would she? One evening, the power went out. Darkness swallowed the street, followed by groans and complaints. Generators roared to life around her, filling the air with noise and smoke. Zana lit a candle in her room and sat on her bed, listening to the familiar chaos outside. She rested her hand on her head unconsciously. Her fingers brushed the scarf. And stopped. Not because she felt something strange. But because she felt nothing. No urge to adjust it. No curiosity. No discomfort. She laughed softly. "So this is how habits are formed," she murmured. The candle flickered briefly. Zana didn't notice. She lay down and stared at the ceiling. The fan was useless without power. Sweat formed lightly on her skin, but she didn't mind. Her mind drifted. She thought of nothing. And that was unusual. On her way to work one morning, Zana stopped at a roadside stall to buy breakfast. The man selling food handed her the item, then paused. He didn't stare rudely. He just hesitated. His eyes lingered briefly on her head wrap, then returned to her face. "Madam," he said slowly, "you resemble someone." Zana smiled politely. "Who?" He shook his head. "I don't know. I just felt it." She thanked him and walked away. As she moved through the crowd, she felt the familiar calm return. Not pride. Not excitement. Just steadiness. Behind her, the man watched her leave, his smile fading into confusion. Weeks passed. Zana noticed something else. People listened to her more. When she spoke, even softly, others paused. When disagreements arose at work, her words carried weight without effort. She didn't argue. She didn't force authority. She simply spoke. And people agreed. One afternoon, a misunderstanding at the shop nearly turned into a fight between two customers. Voices rose. Tempers flared. Zana stepped forward calmly. "Let's talk," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. But the room stilled. The customers quieted. The tension dissolved like mist under sunlight. Later, her colleague stared at her. "You have presence these days," she said. "I don't know how to explain it." Zana laughed lightly. "Maybe I finally grew up." That night, she returned home feeling oddly fulfilled. She untied her scarf slightly, not to remove it, just to loosen it. She didn't feel curiosity. She didn't feel fear. She felt balance. As she lay down to sleep, a single thought crossed her mind, gentle, unforced, fleeting. Some things grow best when left alone. She slept peacefully. And the night listened. It began with a memory Zana had forgotten. Not a dream. A memory. She woke up in the middle of the night, sitting upright on her bed, breath slow, eyes open. The room was quiet in a way that Lagos rooms never were, no distant generators, no late-night arguments, no passing cars. Just silence. Her scarf had loosened in her sleep. For the first time in months, her hair rested freely against her back. She didn't panic. Instead, a deep familiarity washed over her. And then the memory returned. She was a child again, no older than 7, sitting between her mother's knees in the courtyard of their old family house. Her mother's hands were moving gently through her hair, slow and careful. An older woman sat nearby, watching silently. Zana remembered asking a question. "Mama, why does she always look at my hair?" Her mother had paused. Then she said quietly, "Because some heads carry more than thoughts." The memory shifted. The older woman leaned forward, touched Zana's hair once, and nodded. "This one will remember later," she said. Zana gasped softly in her room. Her heart did not race. It settled. The next morning, Zana did something she hadn't done in months. She removed her scarf completely. Not in fear. Not in excitement. In understanding. Her hair had grown long, thick, natural, heavy with presence. It wasn't dirty. It wasn't wild. It simply looked complete. As she touched it, memories flowed, not overwhelming, not painful, just clear. Her mother hadn't been ordinary. She had been a keeper. Not a witch. Not something dark. A woman chosen to hold, observe, and protect certain balances that could not be spoken about openly. And when her mother grew weak with illness, she had done the only thing she could. She had passed the role quietly. No ceremony. No announcement. No warning. Just a sentence spoken at the edge of death. Protect what is yours, even if it costs you comfort. The vow Zana made wasn't random. It was recognition. By not washing her hair, not altering it, not disturbing it, she had allowed the transfer to complete. Hair was not vanity. It was a conduit. A resting place. A crown that listened. And now. It was awake. The changes people noticed were not accidents. The calm. The presence. The knowing without knowing why. Zana was no longer just living in Lagos. She was anchored to it. She began to sense things before they happened, not dramatic visions, not voices, just gentle awareness. When to speak. When to stay silent. When danger would pass. When peace needed help settling. She didn't control people. She didn't interfere loudly. She balanced. The man who once came looking for her, the one who warned her, had been sent to observe whether she would complete the transition willingly. She had. Without fear. Without greed. Without obsession. That was why she was chosen. Weeks later, Zana visited her mother's grave for the first time since the burial. She knelt, touched the earth, and whispered. "I understand now." The wind moved gently through her hair. And for the first time, Zana smiled, not as a grieving daughter, but as a woman who had stepped fully into herself. She still lived her normal life. Still worked. Still laughed. But Lagos felt different around her. Quieter when it needed to be. Calmer when it mattered. Protected in ways no one would ever fully explain. And the truth? She didn't stay months without washing her hair because of neglect. She did it because some inheritances are received only in stillness. Zana did not change her life overnight. That was the part no one talked about. There was no sudden disappearance, no dramatic farewell, no moment where the sky opened and announced her transformation. Instead, life continued, and that was precisely how it was meant to be. Every morning, Lagos still woke before her. The city still argued with itself, laughed with itself, hurried past itself. Hawkers still shouted prices. Buses still honked impatiently. The tailoring shop still smelled of fabric, heat, and thread. Zana still stitched dresses. Still counted change. Still smiled politely at customers. But now, she stood differently in the world. Her presence had weight, not the kind that demanded attention, but the kind that steadied a room. People didn't know why they trusted her judgment. They just did. When arguments arose, they softened when she spoke. When fear crept in, it loosened its grip around her. She never announced herself. She never explained. Because power that needs explanation is already uncertain. At night, Zana sometimes sat quietly by her window, her hair loose, feeling the city breathe. Not listening for voices. Not seeking signs. Just being aware. She understood now that what she carried was not meant to be shown, it was meant to be held. There were moments she felt her mother near. Not as a ghost. As guidance. In the stillness between thoughts. In the calm before a difficult decision. In the peace that followed chaos. Her mother had not burdened her. She had trusted her. And Zana honored that trust not by fear, but by balance. Days turned into months. Months into years. People came and went from Zana's life, never fully understanding why being around her felt grounding. Some described her as lucky. Others said she had good energy. A few simply said, that woman is different. None of them were wrong. And none of them needed the truth. Because the truth was never meant to be loud. It was meant to be enduring. Zana eventually washed her hair again. Not because the power faded. But because it had settled. What was meant to awaken had awakened. What needed stillness had received it. The hair had done its work, not as magic, not as superstition, but as a reminder that some transformations require patience, restraint, and trust. And so the city remained protected in ways it would never document, never celebrate, never fully understand. And Zana? She lived. Fully. Quietly. Purposefully. Not as a legend. But as a keeper of balance. And that was enough. Moral of the story. Some destinies do not arrive with noise or drama. They unfold quietly, through patience, discipline, and obedience to inner wisdom. This story reminds us that not every calling is loud. Not every inheritance is material. Sometimes, growth happens when we stop interfering and allow things to mature in their own time. And true power is not about control, it is about responsibility. If this story made you pause. If it made you rethink small choices. If it reminded you that some things in life are deeper than they appear. Then remember this. What looks ordinary on the surface may be carrying something extraordinary underneath. Thank you for staying till the end of this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because more powerful stories are coming. And before you go, ask yourself this one question. What quiet promise might you be keeping, without even realizing it? Until the next story. Stay curious. Stay patient. Stay aware.